At this time, I want to call Miss Ann Anderson up to the podium. She was the media specialist here at Gulfstream in 1985. And she will be talking about and presenting our time capsule opening.
Jason and Justin, where are you? You guys were terrific. We needed you back in the early 80s. You know, Gulfstream produced a music video in the early 80s, and instead of calling it Beat It, how many people remember the song Beat It, Beat It? Well, we produced Read It, because it was produced in the media center. So, what an amazing connection to between the early 80s and today. My goodness. Miss Bowers called me, and I guess about 2 weeks ago, I can't remember exactly, and I knew on some level that this was coming, but here it is, and it's amazing. It's absolutely incredible to think that 25 years have passed since I stood in this exact spot and spoke to Gulfstream students and teachers, very much like you, about the past, the present, and the future. Just think, the kindergartners back then are now 30 years old, and the fifth graders are now 36. Raise your hand if you're among the students that were here that day. Oh my goodness. I bet a few of you are parents now. In fact, I bet many of the kids that were here that day have families. Can you pick, now, for those of you who are students at Gulfstream today, can you picture yourselves in another 25 years, all grown up and in your 30s? Can you imagine how you will seem to young kids in another 25 years? When they look at pictures of the way you dressed or wore your hair in 2010, can you imagine how old-fashioned your favorite games and toys and TV shows and movies will seem to the kids in the year 2035? That's what the year will be in 25 years. Well, what exactly were we doing in this cafeteria 25 years ago today, way back in 1985? Back before there were cell phones, digital cameras, email, the internet, flat screen TVs, CDs and DVDs, iPods, PlayStations, Hummers, or even cable TV. We were preparing to bury our time capsule. Back then, the principal at Gulfstream Elementary was a man named John Gardner. He got to thinking about the past. Gulfstream had opened in 1960, which meant that it was time to observe Gulfstream's 25th birthday. And in his mind, we weren't just going to sing and have cake. Oh no, Mr. Gardner had a much bigger idea. Not only did he want to invite former students and teachers back for a big party, but he also wanted to do something that would have significance well into the 21st century. And so he came up with the idea of burying a time capsule. And I was the lucky person given the job of figuring out how to do it. Well, fortunately, I wasn't at just any old school. I was here at Gulfstream, which had an outstanding faculty, a wonderful PTA, and generous community support from the Cutler Ridge Women's Club. Is anybody here from that group today? Well, they backed our efforts very enthusiastically. First of all, let's be sure you all know what a time capsule is. They're all shapes and sizes. The dictionary will tell you that a capsule is a compact case or shell for packaging something. You know, medicine like Tylenol comes in capsules. Compact means occupying a small volume by efficient use of space. So we needed to give careful thought as to what we could put into our little time capsule. Now, the basic idea behind the time capsule was really not a new one. For thousands of years, ancient cultures had ways that they would try to leave a message for the future, so people later on would know how they lived and what was important to them. Often they would inscribe messages on clay tablets or create stone carvings. Did you know that many times when significant buildings are constructed, there's a tradition of placing a cornerstone when the work begins? The cornerstone, which is like a special brick at the corner of the building, may contain engraved messages or souvenirs that are significant to the people involved in the construction. Our first president, George Washington, laid the cornerstone for the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. And believe it or not, it's on record that some really big organizations and institutions have buried time capsules in the past, but they can't find them today, and that's a fact. Well, thanks to Mr. Gardner and the PTA, there's no mystery surrounding the whereabouts of Gulfstream's time capsule. The PTA raised money and had a plaque made. All these years, the location of our time capsule has been visible to anyone entering this school, showing the date it was buried and the date it was to be unearthed. If I remember correctly, it was the PTA president's husband, and the president was Gene Hawks. Mr. Hawks actually dug the hole, lined it with cinder blocks, and then poured the cement. And please correct me if anybody remembers differently. Afterwards, we made a videotape of every class walking past the site and peering into the hole. So we have it on record. All of you who are here today are in that tape. Now, where and how could we get an actual time capsule? We knew we couldn't handle anything huge or heavy, and we knew it had to be non-biodegradable. That was a fairly new word back then. In other words, if we were going to put it in the ground, we didn't want it to rust or disintegrate, decompose, or dissolve. Whatever we put in it needed to be protected from air, moisture, bugs, and worms. We also didn't have a whole lot of money to spend on this project. So what had we heard was going to last in landfills forever? Can you guess? You got it. Bingo. Tupperware seemed like the perfect solution. We found a local Tupperware lady named Mrs. Linda Maxwell. You're not here today, are you, Mrs. Maxwell? And you know, when she heard what we were doing, she donated a Tupperware canister for the project. Now, how did we decide what should go into the time capsule? Well, we distributed a list to all classes asking them to create index cards that would let the folks in the far-off year 2010 know what their favorite books, popular TV shows, movies, commercials, record albums, musical groups, celebrities, sports figures, fads, and clothing were. In the 80s, we had 6th graders at Gulfstream, and some of them are here today, so I saw them out on the sidewalk. And they were put in charge of recording current events of the year. All students were asked what message they would like to pass on to the next generation. They could draw or they could use magazine pictures to illustrate their cards. Students also listed how much things cost in 1985, like gas, gold, jeans, and Hershey bars. That was very important to me to put that in. The front page of the Miami Herald, as well as a Time magazine, was also placed inside. Autographed books signed by students and staff, as well as all the guests who attended the big banquet, were placed in the capsule with a photograph and a list of everyone who worked at Gulfstream in 1985. Last but not least, a video of all events, as well as a slide presentation. Boy, is that an antique approach to media. But it was big back then. It was shown at the big banquet and assembly, and that too was placed in the time capsule. So now comes the moment you've all been looking forward to, and the moment we could only try to imagine back in November of 1985. Before we go on, if you could create a time capsule, what would you want people 25 years from now to know about life in 2010? Now, Ms. Bowers, I'm not sure whether you wanted me to physically pull things out of this container. Okay, all right, this could be hazardous. I wish I brought rubber gloves. Well, first of all, I see a whole lot of little buggy something on there, but that's okay. I'm amazed. Here's the video that I mentioned. Wow, in 2 parts. And this is fantastic. I have a copy that I watched the night that Joanne called me, and I laughed and cried. I cried and I laughed hysterically. I cried a little, but I laughed more than I cried. Oh, this is an autograph book. And note how it's in a Ziploc bag, which was good. Too bad it's not closed, and that's why there are little droppings in there. I think before we go any further, if you can, I wish we had a close-up camera that could project this, but this is the lid, which obviously popped off. So that burping Tupperware, for those of you who are from another generation, the older generation, remember how we used to burp Tupperware? Somebody didn't burp it quite right. It's probably me. Okay. Time magazine, the front cover, and look.
Oh, wow.
You kids have probably heard of Princess Di and you know Prince Charles. They were married in 1980, and I guess they were having a baby back then, probably 1985. Oh, and a People magazine, I didn't remember that. And once again, Princess Di. This is a great initiation for your new principal. She's brave to put her hands in there. Here's the first section. Oh no, it's an entire Miami Herald, dated November 13th, 1985. Mayor Javier Suarez is on the cover, and Princess Di again. Good thing you have an antique like me to identify, because from the neck down, President Reagan and President Ronald Reagan and Vice President George Bush, H.W., the father. Oh, and our program. You can still open it. Oh my God, looks like it went through a fire. Look at this. And the Marlins, of course, on the cover. Oh, this is the invitation that was sent out. It looks like something from the Declaration of Independence Day. Like parchment. Oh, how many people here had one of these on their car? Remember the bumper sticker? Lily Harris. We all had these when we pulled into the parking lot, and we really, truly did love Gulfstream. I mean, I still love this school. I left here and went to another school, but I told Ms. Bowers, I left my heart here. I loved my other school dearly and the people, but this is where my heart remains. Mrs. Henry's kindergartners share memories of 1985 with the future. Those are the 30-year-olds in the... Is there anybody here that was a kindergartner back then? Stand up so everybody can see you. And the other package is Mrs. Ross's 6th graders. And I know you're here. Stand up, girls. I know the girls are here. Cheryl, were you? And Mandy? Yes, stand up. Stand up. If you were a 6th grader here, anybody in the audience, please stand up. And this is a collection of photos, and on the top of the pile is Mr. Craig McMahon, who is no longer with us, but he started out teaching 4th grade, and then he taught the gifted class for a number of years. Okay, all of this is going to be put on display. Oh, in the media center. Oh, what a great choice. Okay, all right. Is that happening eventually? It's going to have to be organized. Okay. You'll hear more about that because I don't know the details. Anyway, thank you all for coming today, and this has been amazing.
Thank you, Mrs. Anderson, for a recount of what it was like here at Gulfstream back in 1985.